So I want to do that, and then predictions before we open it up to questions. So who wants to start?
Why is everybody looking at me?
I don't know. Why are we? I think you have one. That's why.
Sure. Well, I guess my prediction is that just as with every major technology revolution that comes upon us, there's a handful of companies that kind of emerge as almost so dominant that it's hard to imagine the world without them. Like, as Dave said, Google's, his kids are younger than Google, you said, or older than Google?
They're older.
They're older than Google, right? But Google is like a word, like it's a verb. And it's quite a weird name, but it's on everybody's mouth now before they, can eat solid foods almost. So my prediction then is that there'll be a handful of companies that emerge out of this Internet of Things space that most people haven't really even heard of yet and don't see coming. That'll be at the heart of all of this data that's coming through. Like that's my prediction is that we'll all have a new word or a new verb that we did not expect to say. And of course, I obviously have a prediction that the Internet of Things connected devices will scale and people will be using Remo. Have to make that, but there you go.
All right.
Yeah, so mine, I like your big picture one. I think mine's a little more specific, unfortunately. Actually, I like the way you took the question, but I'm still going to go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't think that, if I look at what happens in our homes, I don't think a lot of things are use geolocation well yet. So we actively use geolocation. If I pull up Google Maps and try and figure out the directions to Matt's house, I could do that. But my phone is smarter than that, and the devices in my house now are probably smarter than that. So if I start to tie them together, interesting things happen. I'm sure many of you have heard you might not have heard specifically of something called iBeacon, but there is like in-store locationing of where you are so people can advertise to you. Well, what if I use that in a way that's useful to me instead of a way that's useful to the store? My phone knows where I'm at. My phone's always on me, and I'm not unique. So, my thermostat's a smart thermostat. It already talks to the cloud. If I link these things up, I can tell my thermostat to heat the house up before I get there without me actively doing it. You're on your regular route home, you're a mile from home, turn the furnace on. I think you'll see little things like that really do make your life better, and it's based on data that is already gathered. It's just using that data in a different way.
Great.
And I think, just building on that, so we're here talking about the Internet of Things, and we all struggle a little bit with defining what that means. And I think today, Internet of Things means a device that can communicate, you can control or access it, and somewhere throughout our days today, right now, everybody's going to use something that is classified as one of the 50 billion Internet of Things devices, whether it's your TV that's connected to the Internet so you can get Netflix, whether it's the wearable device you have. All of these, there's a number of things that are communicating now. And over the next 5 years, the concept of Internet of Things is going to go away, and I think it'll go, like you say, Mohammed, to specific, really both of you, specific applications. There will be companies that will emerge that will build value that we, as a business, operating our business, or as a consumer, just expect to have happen the way we expect to be able to search the Internet on Google. And I think you're going to see that emerge. The concept of the Internet of Things is just that. It's a concept today, and I think it's going to turn into a reality and something that we just expect to be part of our daily lives, both at home and at work.
Great. Well, I just want to thank the speakers for all those remarks, for sharing their insight and their knowledge. And we'll officially rename this on the Connected World. So any questions on the Connected World session that you're at, we'd love to take your questions and have a little conversation. So Christine Singh from our office is going to help with this. I'm just going to grab a mic from me. My bad. Thanks.
Good morning. First off, thank you for the presentation this morning. This has been very helpful and enlightening. I think about the issue of overshare of information. Dave, you mentioned your children maybe share more information about where they are and those sorts of things than older folks tend to do. I think about the mayhem commercials that I saw during the college football playoffs, where Mayhem was advertised, selling your stuff because he knew that Joe and Jane were off someplace and they were not in their home and things like that. So I'm envisioning issues related to the Internet of Things where, because all of this data is getting collected about where we're at and where we're not at, how can companies help us not do dumb things by oversharing some of the personally identifiable information? How do you see technology emerging in that area to help us from not inadvertently making dumb decisions related to that?
Do you want to go ahead?
Well, there's a couple things about that. I mean, again, the funny thing about the Internet of Things, just like the Internet, is a lot of the work that's happening there and it's building up on the infrastructure side is being done by relatively established veterans. So they've already had to address security protocols and interests before, and they're aware of some of the dangers. On the other side, some of the new innovations are coming from hackers. And hackers, by their name, are very familiar with the security aspects and will develop ways around that. When we were at Microsoft, another member of the Internet of Things accelerator focused specifically on security for internet-connected or connected devices. And even in the case of remote, for example, this is a device that you can do remotely, but is also local. So, somebody would have to be physically present to do certain things if you set it up that way. And then finally, a big portion of the, I'd call it security, but there's also an entertainment factor too, in home Internet of Things stuff, is connected cameras. And so, yeah, you might be at Target and there might be some signal that you're away, but you're always just that close to being able to tap on your smartwatch in the future, press that button, and boom, you can see that everything's okay, that the babysitter's not killing your baby or something, that your uncle is fine, and that there's not a burglar. And so, even as we build up all of this and that data's out there, there's a definite mindset, because we all know that if we don't address the data security aspect as well as the privacy aspect, then people won't adopt. Also, although it is the case that the younger generation, I myself am a millennial, does share, and some might even say overshare, we still see the things that happen with the leaks of data that come from people using technology, possibly irresponsibly, from folks who are our own age or older. And as those things happen, as we take on professions, et cetera, we start working with employees and it becomes a part of our jobs. There are certain norms that will change and that do change, but there's other things that people become more conservative with age just because then they've got kids of their own. So it's not all pessimism.
If I could just, kind of build on that a little bit. So there will be continued protections built into all communicating devices to, authenticate who you are, to encrypt data, and to prevent, hacking or unauthorized access to that information. But I think it comes down to the privacy and what gets shared and how is that used. I envision a lot of this will kind of be an opt-in type of environment. So there could be, I'm in the security world. Security, if you get monitored security today, you pay a fee for it. As you get more connected devices, there's a possibility it could be offset with selling of data, advertising information, using some of the data in a different way. We do things every day. Every search you do on Google targets who you are. Everything you do on Netflix targets who you are. When it pops up, it says, here's the types of things that you're going to like. And these are, it's a way to use data that makes these services free, and we're willing to allow them to have access to it because of that. Google probably knows where I am right. Well, they do, because I used Google to track, on my phone. I use Google Maps to get here, and so they know exactly where I am today, and they know how I got here, and they know how fast I drove. So some of it is you share because there's benefits it brings to me, and there might be an option at some point to say I'm going to pay $30 a month and not share. or I'm going to get it for free and share. You see that in apps today that people are using on their phones. You can get the paid version, and they don't, put things in your face, or you can put up with ads. I think some of that's going to happen over time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Other question? Oh, sorry, is there something else?
I actually really didn't have much to add, 'cause I think they covered it well, except for,
I do actually have one thing to add. Sorry.
may I?
Yeah, please,
So
please continue.
all I was really going to say is about personal privacy. So to the point Dave was making about Google, but really just about any other service like that, you can choose to do things like not accept cookies. So one site can't tell you've been to another site, but you always have an IP address. So when you query Google, they may not know what your name is, although they probably do, they're Google. but they definitely know what your IP address was and what searches have come from that IP address. So they can still tailor things to you based on what you've done in the past. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bad side and a good side of all this sharing of data potentially. But I mean, predictions. I'll predict at some point in the future somebody's going to say, no, I didn't murder that person because I was in this other place, and Google knows it, and Apple knows it, and and there's a plenty of data trail for it. And so just like almost kind of like DNA evidence, it has the potential to become a thing that's supportive as well.
Interesting. Yeah. So, Daniel?
I was wondering about open languages or standards. Like, are there devices, or will there be devices where one device is saying, I'm looking for some temperature information, and then another device nearby will say, oh, I have temperature information, here you go, that type of thing? Or what's the kind of the state of that type of thing?
Yeah, that's close. So I'll answer from the industrial side. I'm not sure if you want to throw in a consumer side answer, but there are tools out there that are developing and they're open source, and you can look at them today. So there's one called Node-RED, which is very interesting. We actually have it running on multi-tech routers and also our cloud system. But again, you can go get it. It's not ours. We're just using it. And it's cool for exactly the thing that you just described. You can kind of graphically connect up all your sensors, and then you said languages. So one I'll point out is JavaScript. You're familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can do all these graphical things, and then whatever customizations you might want to do to say, hey, devices, do you have this? You can, and then it becomes another little square that you can hook up graphically. So the answer is yes, and in particular, go look up Node-RED. It does what you want.
What about more devices communicating independently?
You mean amongst each other?
Yeah.
That's more like Thread. So that's that is devices that do communicate amongst each other in a smallish area.
It's almost a device presents, I'm here, here's what I know, and here's what I can do, and creating an environment where you can almost subscribe to pieces of information you want or things you want to control.
Yeah,
It's like now where my apps say, here's friends I have nearby, it'll say,
Here's
what other
things
machines
you
you
might
want to know.
Yeah.
We're already, I mean, if you try to think about how's this technology really going to affect your lives, we're already affected by something relatively similar. I'm hungry, Yelp tells me what the restaurants are around. I want to go somewhere, Uber shows up. There's dating apps where it does by proximity that you're around, that your phone is the primary connected device everyone has, or a lot of folks have, that's saying, I'm looking for somebody in this room who's in, security analysis or whatever, and that one's saying, I'm looking for folks who are looking for that. There's apps for that already. So,
Other questions? Comments?
Thank you for a good talk. This has really been interesting. I'm a mechanical engineer. I do product development, and I've actually, just myself and I've been making some Internet of Things devices. And I've been shocked at how easy it is to build these things. Absolutely trivial almost from an engineering perspective. And I'm not that good of an engineer. So my assumption is that the Internet of Things, there are no barriers to entry. It's very easy to build. It'll be trivial to put these billions and billions of little devices in the world. And I think all of the value will be, and it's been talked about, will be to aggregate all of these cheap, simple devices that will be everywhere, in your sock. By the way, I've I'm tutoring some, or not tutoring, I'm teaching some high school kids. That slide that Matt showed of all the different things, I'm pretty sure they could build every single one of those within a couple of days or weeks. It's very trivial. But what's interesting is to aggregate the data. So my question is, in this aggregation of our data back to these companies, do you think it's ever going to be possible or logical that we will own our data? That all of these things that we are creating, all the sensors, all of our pictures, all of our locations, will we have ownership and be willing to sell it in the open market to companies like Google?
Great question, thanks.
I'd say if it has value, the answer to that is yes, right? I mean, it depends, right? There's nothing that says you have to give your data to anybody in IoT. Well, as much as there are services for analytics, for storage, for visualizations, there are those that don't want to do that. I have several customers today that they keep their stuff entirely off the internet as much as possible. So they have their own back-end databases because that information is valuable to them. And in the cases I'm thinking of, I don't think they actually sell that data, but they absolutely use it to action on, and they consider it very competitive. So if you had a situation where you've gathered a lot of data and you can see that somebody wants that for some reason, even just marketing, maybe I misunderstood your root question, but I don't know why you couldn't sell that.
What I kind of meant is like a Google type company that I would sell to them, they would aggregate the data and then sell it for me. Because
okay.
I don't, obviously one person, but why are we giving away all of our data? And we know why, because we're getting free services, but obviously Google's making a ton of money on our free data.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, right now you're paying with your data. I mean, a big part of it's just that the populace isn't exactly organized around capitalistic expression of their personal data. It'd be
Well
quite
stated.
an interesting. What's that?
Well stated.
Thank you. I mean, that would be pretty awesome, and I'd kind of actually just like to see it just to see what it looks like. But with regard to your statement about barriers to entry, just to comment on that quickly. It's true that I mean, I'm a scientist by training. I'm a cognitive, and my PhD is in cognitive science and physics of speech, so waveforms and things like that. But yet, I came up with this crazy device. That said, though, the barriers to entry between prototyping something with an Arduino, putting together a breadboard, wiring some stuff, and putting together a consumer device that can become ubiquitous that you can rely on, that's still miles and miles of work. The barriers to entry are still pretty solid, and also the innovation lead time. You can come up with a connected sock, but the people who have the skills, the training, the site, the connections can build that sock and put it on the market before you've even finished your prototype. So there are some. I don't mean you specifically, but yeah. But that's a very interesting concept, the organization of people around commercialization of their data. And I would expect to see something like that in the future, some kind of data co-op. But it's almost odd that we haven't seen that yet, though, given the massive amount of sharing.
Well, I think one of the comments I made earlier is I think service business models around connected devices will evolve where effectively you're selling your data. It's not going to be, here's my data, give me X amount of dollars. It's going to be the service is subsidized by access and availability to the data. I think that is happening today and will probably be the model that will fall under.
All right. We don't have time even for one more question, but it's possible the speakers will be around a little bit afterwards so that you could come up, introduce yourselves, talk to them, ask questions. Feel free to talk to any of our Nuger Communications folks who are around also if you want to know more about Nuger Communications Group. And again, thanks for coming. Thanks to our speakers.